In this video, I'll give you my predictions for UFC 286. We'll break down the entire card, talk about some betting opportunities, some prop opportunities, and as always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Before we get into anything, just a quick moment of silence for JJ Aldrich.
I am having a very bad day. I am in no mood.
Now we can get right into the card. Our main event is the trilogy between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. We know what both of these guys can bring to the table. Leon Edwards is a sharp striker, strong grappler, and as experienced as they come, and quite possibly the most well-rounded fighter on the roster. He's on a 10-fight winning streak, and he defends his belt for the first time this week against Kamaru Usman, and this is going to be a tough one. Usman has been nothing short of dominant in the UFC, out-wrestling his competition, showing off improved striking during his championship reign, and having cardio for days considering that he is the CEO of EPO.
That's a joke, boy.
And we don't really need to comb through all their fights. We can look at the last fight, and that'll tell us everything we need to know about this matchup. Round 1 starts with Leon Edwards taking Kamaru Usman down, being the first man to do it, winning the clinch battle, controlling him on the ground, and winning that first round. But for the next 3 rounds and 4 minutes, he gets completely dominated. It was complete one-way traffic to the point where it was almost boring. Usman took him down repeatedly, landed more strikes, and looked like he was in firm control of the fight and on his way to win a decision. And we all know how it ended. And when you watch it back, it was a great setup by Leon Edwards, but more than a setup by Leon Edwards, it was a moment of complacency from the then champion. Really a lapse in judgment from Kamaru Usman, who could have just kept fighting the way he was for the 19 minutes leading up to that, and he would have been perfectly fine. And because of that, when you look outside of the first round where Leon had success taking him down and that big strike that he landed at the end of the 5th, there isn't much that would lead me to believe that Leon Edwards is better than Kamaru Usman, nor do I think he's going to win this week. Usman has better cardio, better wrestling, he's physically stronger. I do think that Leon Edwards is the better striker. He made that pretty obvious last time out. But historically, Leon Edwards is not some kind of knockout artist. In 15 UFC fights, Leon Edwards has 3 knockouts. So I think that's a bit of an outlier. I don't see him knocking out Kamaru Usman again. And if he's not knocking him out, I don't know how he wins this fight. Because Kamaru Usman is the better minute winner with his control in the clinch, his takedowns, his forward pressure. He wins more minutes, he wins more rounds. And if this fight goes the distance, Kamaru Usman wins a decision. From a betting perspective, the line is pretty wide, especially considering that Leon won the last fight, so I think if you did want to attack a prop here, Kamaru Usman by decision is probably the most likely outcome. That's my prediction for the fight, and I think that's where you should put your money if you're looking to bet this one. Now we move on to a banger of a fight, the co-main event, Justin Gaethje, Rafael Fiziev, a fight that is not going to go the distance. Fiziev is riding a 6-fight winning streak where he's looked phenomenal. He most recently knocked out RDA, who is historically durable. Before that, he knocks out Brad Riddell with that crazy spinning wheel kick, and he went to war with Bobby Green, smoked Hanato Moicano. He's looked excellent. He's got sharp, fast, heavy hands and the best kicks in the division. He's probably the best striker in the division, not named Dustin Poirier.
How'd you like that clavicle?
And he gets another striker this week in the Homer Simpson of MMA, Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje has never been in a boring fight, and as a fan, I think that Gaethje deserves all the respect for being the best fight on every card that he's a part of. Nothing but respect for the man. From a betting perspective and a technical standpoint, however, I think he's completely outgunned here because Fiziev is going to knock him out in the first or second round. Justin Gaethje breaks guys with power, pressure, and pace, but he's terribly hittable, absorbing an egregious 7.85 significant strikes per minute. The man gets hit more than a snare drum, and we've seen him rocked multiple times in the UFC. Michael Johnson had him all kinds of hurt, Eddie Alvarez battered him, Dustin Poirier destroyed him. We most recently saw Charles Oliveira sit him down with a straight right hand. And Justin Gaethje likes to brawl. He likes to throw hooks, overhands, uppercuts, while Fiziev is going to be throwing jabs, straight combinations that end with hooks or kicks. So he's clearly the more sophisticated striker of the two, and Justin Gaethje is going to come at him with everything, which means he's probably going to get caught with his hands in the cookie jar and punished. This looks like a if you reach, I teach kind of situation for Fiziev, and I expect him to win this fight by knockout. Now we have a great fight that the UFC made. Hats off to the matchmakers for this. We have 2 veterans that are getting main card spots. You love to see it. Bryan Bam Bam Barberena versus Gunnar Nelson, and Bam Bam comes to war because of his output, his chin, his cardio. We saw him land 147 significant strikes on Robbie Lawler inside of 2 rounds. If the fight stays standing, I think he absolutely smokes Gunnar Nelson. I think he lights him up on the feet and finishes him late. The problem for Bam Bam, though, is the takedown defense. The man can't defend a takedown, and that's a big old problem this week against Gunnar Nelson, because Gunnar Nelson's going to do everything he can to get him down to the mat, and just like his hairline, he's going to get him out of there. Nelson's made a career of dragging guys to the mat, maintaining top control, and wrapping up a neck. And he only loses to very high-level competition. Recent losses are to Gilbert Burns, who's a hell of a grappler. The same could be said for Leon Edwards. But Bryan Barberena doesn't exactly have that in his locker, which is why I think that Gunnar Nelson wins this fight by submission. Now, if Barberena can extend Nelson, I favor his gas tank, I favor his output, and I think he could break him with that pressure and that volume, but a striker versus grappler matchup is a tale as old as time. It's not 100%, but you know.
60% of the time, it works. Every time.
So the pick is Gunnar Nelson by submission. Now we have the return of King Casey O'Neill. It's upon us, and I cannot wait. Women's flyweight is absolute gas right now, with Grasso holding the belt, Shevchenko still there, Talia Santos, Erin Blanchfield, Manon Fior, and now this woman. Casey O'Neill's an undefeated 9-0. She eats people.
I can eat in street fight.
She takes her opponents down. She lands heavy ground and pound, which either leads to the ref stepping in and stopping it, or it opens up a submission. We know that she's a strong wrestler, but we've also seen the striking catch up as well. We saw that in her last fight against Roxanne Modafferi. She threw nearly 400 strikes in a 3-round fight, and you could see here landing 230 of them, with 229 of them considered significant. One can't simply land 229 significant strikes and lose a decision. Couldn't happen. And now on the... What's that? Yeah, with the way judging is right now, somebody could land that many and lose. You're right. Oscar's back, by the way. I hired him again. He's on half of his pay as before, but he's really shaped up. So we'll see if he can get back to his full pay in a couple of weeks. Now she faces Jennifer Maia, who's 9 years older, 2-3 in her last 5, and much smaller in terms of height and reach. Jennifer Maia is a grappler, obviously that strong BJJ background, but it never really translated to MMA when you consider that she only has 1 submission win in the UFC. On top of that, no one's afraid to take her down. You see fighters with strong jiu-jitsu like Charles Oliveira, Paul Craig, Damian Maia. These are fighters that people don't want to go to the mat with, and Jennifer Maia isn't exactly one of those. People aren't respecting her bottom game. On the feet, she's an underrated striker, but she doesn't have enough power to really make these shots count that she's landing, and I think that's why Casey O'Neill is a huge favorite this week. I expect her to dominate wherever the fight takes place, landing more strikes, landing with bigger power when they're standing, and then dictating the positions when they're on the mat. She's younger, she's bigger, she's better everywhere. I expect her to win this week, move to 10-0, maybe fight Amanda Hebos next, who knows, but the pick for me is Casey O'Neill by decision. Next, we're looking at fight of the night if Justin Gaethje doesn't do what he always does. We have fight of the night here with Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze. Thick Marv is bringing that 65-inch chest of his to London, England this week to be a bully. That's what Marvin Vettori is. Marvin Vettori is a bully. He looks like he was a bully growing up, real talk, and it looks like it's translated into the octagon today. He likes to be the aggressor. He's always moving forward. He's putting a lot out there. He pressures and grinds guys up against the cage and then down to the mat. He stays in his opponent's face the whole time, and he has the chin and cardio to be able to do that. We saw him go toe-to-toe with a giant Paulo Costa when they had to weigh in at 205 that night, and we saw him land a ton of strikes against Jack Hermanson in a 5-round fight. We also saw him control Kevin Holland for over 20 minutes in that fight, landing 11 takedowns. Marvin Vettori is a beast, and not an easy fight for anyone. On the other side, you have Roman Dolidze, and this man has been ruining people's day in the cage with his crushing power and his slick grappling. The best way I could describe Roman Dolidze, if you don't watch a ton of MMA or you're not really familiar with him, is that he's violent. Everything is thrown with fight-ending intent, and you can tell he's super confident in his abilities, especially on the mat. He's not afraid to be taken down because of how good of a grappler he is. And this is a tough one for me because we've seen Marvin Vettori fight the best of the best in the UFC for a long time, but we've also seen him lose multiple times for different reasons. We saw Shoeface out-grapple him in his second fight in the UFC. We saw Omar Akhmedov work him for the first 2 rounds of that fight. We saw that he was just a step behind Stylebender in both of their fights, and last time out he got destroyed by the movement and the accuracy of Robert Whittaker. But those fights tell us something. Those fights tell us that Marvin Vettori is who he is. He's damn good at everything, but he's not great at any one specific thing. He relies heavily on that bully style, and when it doesn't work out, he doesn't change his game plan. There's no plan B. Roman's gonna land those big hooks on that blockhead of Marvin Vettori, and I could see him reversing position when Vettori starts looking for takedowns. Marvin Vettori is historically durable, so I could see this fight going the distance, but then again, Roman Dolidze, he has that power. And you hear in MMA all the time, oh, well, this guy's not going to get knocked out because he's never been knocked out before. But if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know how I feel about that. Nobody's been knocked out until they've been knocked out. It almost reminds me of a Vicente Luque, Jeff Neal situation. Jeff Neal can't knock him out. Vicente Luque's never been knocked out. And then we see Vicente Luque lifeless. The streak that this man has put together and the fashion with which he's winning these fights leads me to believe that not only is he going to win this fight, not only is he sneaky value, but I do think that he could be the first man to put Marvin Vettori away. The pick for me in this fight is going to be Roman Dolidze, and it's going to be inside the distance. Next, we're looking at a grappler versus grappler matchup, and if cardio weren't an issue, I'd be all over the underdog here. Makwan Amirkhani's front choke bag is deep. He's got anacondas, darces, guillotines, and Jack Shore is going to be shooting for takedowns early and often. But for Makwan Amirkhani, he's toast after the first few minutes. This feels to me like a Derek Brunson situation a couple of weeks ago, where he was clearly the better fighter skill-wise, but his body didn't allow him to keep going. He gassed hard and ended up losing that fight, and I feel similarly for Makwan Amirkhani, who's a gifted grappler, but only for about 3 3/4 minutes. Realistically, what I think happens is Shore is going to be able to defend takedowns early, get takedowns of his own, and ultimately choke out Amirkhani like Cat Williams. I could also see some club and sub action from Jackie Shore this week because the man can strike as well. Now, he's coming off a loss, his first career loss, and that was against Ricky Simone, who clubbed and subbed him, but let's not forget that Ricky Simone is that dude. Ricky Simone is the last man to beat Merab, and Merab's ranked #1 in the division right now, so there's no shame in that loss. And again, that's his first career loss, and from a betting perspective, and even for his career, that's not always a bad thing. So I think that Jack Shore gets back on track this week, finishing the veteran grappler in Amirkhani sometime in the second round. Give me Jack Shore by submission. Real quick, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You can congratulate Oscar on him getting his job back. Next, we have the UFC debut of Chris Duncan. He's fighting Omar Morales this week. You might remember Chris Duncan from that crazy comeback on the Contender Series. The dude has tons of heart, tons of power in his hands, and he's looking to make a statement this week in his UFC debut in front of what is kind of a hometown crowd. On the other side, you have Omar Morales, who I have no idea how or if he's been a full-time fighter since his pro debut in 2011. He has 14 fights into his pro career that is 12 years long, and now he's 37 years old. I don't know how that works. He's coming off back-to-back losses. In his last fight, he was slapped around like a hockey puck by Uros Medic, and before that, he had no answers for JSP's grappling. We've seen him dropped in the past, so we know that Chris Duncan is going to come at him with everything, so I do think that Chris Duncan wins this fight, and I think this is a setup spot for the UFC. I think the UFC is moving on from Omar Morales at this point, because even before he was matched up with this guy, he was matched up with Matus Rebecki, who was also a power puncher making his debut from the Contender Series. Now Morales was injured in that fight, had to pull out, but it's obvious that they have a plan for Omar Morales at 37 years old. The UFC wants their Contender Series guys to win. They want them to look good, so they're going to put Omar Morales in there with a big puncher, test that durability, and be a showcase spot for these new guys, and that's why I think that Chris Duncan wins this fight by knockout. Our next fight is between two guys who are making their debuts, Sam Patterson and Yanal Ashmoz. And there's a lot of hype surrounding Sam Patterson, and it's easy to see why. The dude is huge for the weight class, standing at 6'3" like Jalen Turner. He has cardio for days, and he's finishing damn near everyone. You'll see on the screen 0-0-0, but that's not his record. He's on a 10-fight unbeaten streak. He's fought decent competition as well in Brave FC, and he's most recently picked up a second-round submission on the Contender Series. Now again, he is really big for the division, really tall and lanky for the division, and that does give me a little bit of pause just because he has that tall guy defense, and somebody's going to test that one day. Somebody's going to punish that one day. Will that be Yanal Ashmoz making his UFC debut? It could be, because he likes to move forward, he likes to throw power shots at all times, and he has tons of heart. He's fighting out of a good gym, and I think he can win fights at the UFC level, but this week, maybe not. My concerns for Ashmoz are that he doesn't have great takedown defense, and he's got that wild striking style. If you've looked back on Patterson's fights, he uses his length very well, not only in the clinch and when he's grappling, but also when he's striking. He moves backward quickly, creating a ton of space, and that space sucks his opponents in, but his long arms keep him in range to land heavy while his opponents are still stuck out of range. I could see a sequence like that ending the fight this week, where Ashmoz is swinging hooks, trying to close distance while Patterson fades back, lands a heavy shot that drops him, and then he jumps on him for the finish. So give me the bigger man to win this week, the guy with more experience, and the guy that I think has more ways to win this fight. Give me Sam Patterson to win this fight by submission. Next, we have one of the hottest prospects in all of MMA. We always talk about this guy's experience, but it's worth talking about. Muhammad Mokaev is only 22 years old, yet the man has 22 amateur fights, 9 fights in his pro career. That's crazy stuff. He's a relentless grappler. He takes everybody down. He fights for submissions, and he's the biggest favorite on the card. But I'm telling you right now, the line is a little too juiced up. The line's a little too wide for my liking. Jafel Filho is making his UFC debut, but he's a plus 550, and that's probably going to increase throughout the week, and that's a bit bonkers to me considering that Mokaev was a minus 1400 against Malcolm Gordon. Didn't look like a minus 1400 favorite in that fight. Malcolm Gordon's not great, and he almost finished Mokaev twice in that fight, and now he takes on an even more dangerous grappler with heavy hands on the feet in Filho. This to me feels a bit like a Josh Fremd situation from last week. By the way, if somebody told you to bet against Josh Fremd last week, just know they don't know what they're looking at. But when you think about it, this is a big spot, tons of hype. He's a massive favorite. He's in London. There's tons of pressure on Mokaev to go out there and perform, which he probably will do. The guy's a beast. I don't want to discredit anything Muhammad Mokaev has done so far, but I will say that on the feet, I think Filho probably gives him issues. I think he has heavier hands. I think he has better hands, and I think that if he lands cleanly, he can really stun this kid. We saw Muhammad Mokaev cling to Charles Johnson like Velcro, but he didn't do much with the positions that he had. And Charles Johnson, sometimes his fights look like that, where he's just not doing a whole lot. Filho is all action, and if he doesn't accept bad positions and he makes Muhammad Mokaev work, I could see him giving the young man problems. And again, the line is just way too wide. You shouldn't lay minus 800 or more because people are going to put Muhammad Mokaev in their parlays. He can go out there and look the way that he always looks and dominate. But the value here is most definitely on the Brazilian this week at plus 550, which will probably go up to plus 700 by Saturday. The pick is Muhammad Mokaev, but the bet is definitely Filho. Filho inside the distance at whatever crazy odds those end up being. That's the spot that you should take if you want to bet this fight. I would not trust Muhammad Mokaev at those crazy odds in your parlays. It's not going to give you much value in your parlays. Not something that you need to do. Next, we finally get to see the return of Lerone Murphy. Last time we saw him was October of 2021, the month that this channel was started, which feels like ages ago. In his last fight, he fought Makwan Amirkhani, who took him down 5 times in the opening round and looked like he was going on to dominate that fight. Of course, in Makwan Amirkhani fashion, he got tired after round 1, started the second round with a lazy shot, and Lerone Murphy landed a short knee that ended the night. Murphy's still unbeaten and looking to keep it that way as he faces UFC debutant Gabriel Santos. LFA champion Santos is taking this fight on short notice, replacing Nathaniel Wood, but I do think that this is a good test for Murphy. What I like from Santos is the volume, the power, the willingness to mix in the wrestling, and the solid experience outside of the UFC. For Murphy, what I like about him is the power as well, but my issue with him is that he doesn't let his hands go that often. On top of that, he doesn't defend takedowns all that well, nor is he going to look to grapple much himself. Now, I don't know what the cardio is going to look like for Santos stepping in on short notice, but if it holds up, I can see him simply outworking Lerone Murphy and winning a decision. Murphy, while being unbeaten, is not the kind of guy who you want to put your money on because of his pace. And from a betting perspective, a ton of money has come in on Gabriel Santos, and I think it's for good reason. I think that he's going to win this fight. You could still get him at plus money, so there's still value here. I think that he wins by decision, and he's definitely the play this week. This next fight looks like a Kunith classic. It looks like a spot where I would take a shot on the UFC veteran underdog. This has me written all over it. It feels, it smells, it looks, it tastes just like that, but it's something that I can't do because I can't trust the chin of Dusko Todorovic against the power of Christian Leroy Duncan. Dusko is super talented. We've seen him have success out grappling his opponents, and I think he could win this fight if he leaned on his grappling, but the Frankenstein pose that he hits when he gets rocked, plus how tired he gets early into these fights and how little it takes to put him down, all point to him getting knocked out this weekend. And Christian Leroy Duncan is going to throw everything at this guy this week. Spinning technique, flying knees up the middle, and fundamental boxing with nasty intent.
That's nasty.
And Christian Duncan is 7-0 as a professional, but he has a ton of amateur experience, and also as a pro, he's been fighting solid competition, being in Cage Wars for his entire professional career. I think this is a showcase spot for him on the London card. He wins this fight this week by knockout in the first or second round. Taking his knockout prop is definitely the way to go this week. It might be worth taking one knockout prop in round 1 and another one for round 2, sprinkling out that exposure a little bit, but I really just can't get behind that flimsy Dusko Todorovic chin against the guy who's bringing as much power as this guy. So the pick for me in this fight is going to be Christian Duncan by knockout. Next, we have a fight with Jake Hadley and Malcolm Gordon, and we can look at the skill set, which we will in a second, but let's just be real about what's happening here.
I see what's happening, yeah.
Jake Hadley is over a minus 300 favorite. He's 9-1. He's from England. He's younger, and the UFC is looking to build him up. Malcolm Gordon is somebody who's brought in to lose, and this is not the first time in the UFC we've seen this. We saw that against Denise Bondar. We saw that against Muhammad Mokaev. Now we're seeing it against Jake Hadley. These are all fighters that the promotion wants to build up. That's why they give them Malcolm Gordon. What makes Malcolm Gordon a winnable fight? 9% takedown defense. That's right, 9. Sloppy striking. He's been finished in all of his career losses, and he's been an underdog in all of his fights in the UFC. Jake Hadley is a strong grappler, a finisher on the mat, and he's getting better with every fight, and he's a little bit younger. It's a very easy spot for Jake Hadley this week, a parlay piece for you at his odds, but definitely a guy who wins this fight. I think he finishes. I think Jake Hadley wins this fight by submission. Next, we're looking at Joanne Wood and Luana Carolina. This is a fight that goes the distance. Now, you might look at her recent record and see those 4 losses, the 1 win, but those losses are to the current champion, somebody who could have very well been given the decision to be a champion, Natalia Santos, Lauren Murphy, who recently challenged for the title, Jennifer Maia, who challenged for the title at one point. But again, this fight probably goes the distance, and what I like for this week is the output. You see here 121 significant strikes, 148, 101, you have 112 right here, 85, and then you have Luana Carolina, who's more reactionary, right? 25 significant strikes and a 3-round win. 53 significant strikes, 64 in a 3rd round finish. The frustrating part about Luana Carolina is that she's not first, she's second. And the thing about Joanne Wood is that she's probably going to be 1st and 3rd in this fight, throwing 1-2 leg kick, 1-2 body kick. And Luana Carolina likes to get in the pocket. She likes to be in the clinch, working her Muay Thai, and that's where Joanne Wood is at her best. The elbows, the knees, the short shots inside, that's where Joanne Wood makes her money, and that's why I think that she's going to win this fight. She's going to have bigger moments, she's going to land more on the feet, she's going to do better work in the clinch. I think that JoJo wins this fight by decision. And at her odds as a slight favorite, I do like her money line this week. Next, we have Ludovic Klein, the very first fighter that was ever broken down on the channel. Special place in our hearts. He fights Jai Herbert this week. Ludovic Klein came through last time out when he beat Mason Jones. Showed toughness, durability, power, dropping Mason Jones in that fight, and he grinds out a decision win. Before that, we saw him grind out a decision win over Devontae Smith, just beating him to the positions in the clinch, being able to control the pace of the fight. A lot of control time as well. For Klein, you gotta love the high kick, you gotta love the distance management, and he does some decent work on the mat. For his opponent in Jai Herbert, you love the power, you like the size for the division. I think that he has all the makings of somebody who can give anybody a tough fight. My issues with Jai Herbert, and if you've watched this channel for a while, you know this is how I feel about Jai Herbert. The guy does not focus. I feel like Jai Herbert loses focus in his fights, and as a result gets finished because he's not very fast, he's not very durable. I don't think he's a great athlete by any means. I do think that he's a banger and somebody who can win a lot of fights at a certain level, but I don't think that he's somebody who is going to be able to stay focused for a full 15 minutes. He has his most success with guys like Hamaworthy, who are going to stand and bang with him and see whose chin gives out first, because this guy does have power. We even saw him drop Ilia Topuria, but we also saw what Topuria did to him when he folded him like laundry. Even last time out, he beats Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson was working him in the first round, gassed out, and that's when Jai Herbert was able to take over. But he doesn't throw a ton of strikes. Again, he's not that fast. I think he's at a decided hand speed, striking speed disadvantage in this spot. And in that first round, he's really dangerous, but I think after that first round is when he's going to start making mistakes. That's when Klein is going to have his opportunities. He's going to see those opportunities, and he's going to capitalize on those opportunities. We know that Klein has power in his hands, and we know that he can disguise that head kick well, and that head kick gets to the target real quick. I expect to see Ludovic Klein knock him out with a head kick sometime in the second round, put 2 punches in front of it to disguise it, come up high. Jai Herbert's hands aren't going to be where they need to be, and he's going to knock him out. Klein is also a tough guy who I think is going to be able to take some of that offense early from Jai Herbert, but again, I do think that he just beats him to the punch. Slightly better speed, slightly better control, and I think he wins this fight by knockout. And lastly, we have a fight with Juliana Miller. She's fighting Veronica Hardy this week. Veronica Hardy is 1-4 in the UFC. This spot is a little strange to me. Maybe she lives there, considering that she's married to Dan Hardy. Maybe she thought, short trip, I'll just be able to get on the card, but I do think that she's up against it this week against Juliana Miller, who is a strong grappler, is going to find herself in top position probably early. We saw last time out what Juliana Miller could do when it comes to the grappling. We saw her get those body lock takedowns over Brogan Walker and basically just land that crazy ground and pound. A lot of elbows. Refs don't like the elbows, so if she gets in top position, starts throwing those elbows, I could see the ref step in pretty early. On the feet, she definitely leaves a lot to be desired, but that's also what you would expect from a younger fighter who's only 5 fights into their career, with that grappling base. There's always a lot made of fighters nowadays being good at everything, and I think that's true at a very high level, but when people are just starting out, normally they excel at one thing, not other things, and that's why we see people that are kind of one-dimensional even when they come into the UFC. But I'd have to imagine that the more active fighter here is probably getting better at a faster rate, and she's going to put together a performance just like she did last time out where she looked dominant. Veronica Hardy does have decent striking. I just don't think that the fight will stay on the feet for all that long. So I think that Juliana Miller wins this fight. She gets the takedowns. She does it inside the distance, either by submission or by ground and pound. But Juliana Miller's definitely the play this week. She's definitely the pick this week inside the distance. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you later in the week for final picks.